of Information and Communication Technology for Built Environment after his career of 24 years as a building design architect, in which he won 12 first prizes in architectural competitions as the main assistant to Arto Kiviniemi. He worked at VTT in Finland as a senior research scientist from 96 to 99, the chief research scientist from 99 to 06, and the research professor for ICT and Built Environment and research coordinator for ICT and processes in the Built Environment from 06 to 08. From 97 to 02, Arto led the Finnish National Technology Program VERA, which has a total budget of $62 million. The program established Finland's position as one of the leading countries in utilizing integrated BIM in real estate and the construction industry. In this period, Arto established a leading role in the global development and deployment of the integrated BIM modeling concept. He has done many other things as well, and I will post his bio and information on our website where our presentation is. So for now, I want to thank Arto very much for joining us and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Nicola, and also good morning from me, or actually good evening, because I'm speaking from Finland and it's already past 6 o'clock in the evening. So I'm speaking about this topic of effects of the integrated BIM, and BIM, building information modeling, is quite hot topic at the moment in our industries, in the building industries. I'm now working in a company which has been using integrated BIM for a long time. Olof Granlund, where I work, is the largest building services engineering consulting firm in Finland. We are covering all building services areas and lifecycle information management in our activities. Company is almost 50 years old now. We have 365 people working in there. And the total turnover was about 42 million last year. And we are also exporting quite a lot of services. But what is really special in this company is that we are investing in a lot in the research and development. About 10% of our turnover is used to develop the methods and tools. And I'm actually responsible of the software development in the company. And I'm the only architect among 350 engineers, so quite strange world nowadays that this kind of a role. So that's about the company. We have a little bit about the history, how the company has been applying the building information models. So the company started to use building information models already more than 10 years ago, and then started to do the software development, so that we had the first IFC compliant tools already in 2000, and 2004 we passed the milestone of 500 modeled buildings and projects in our activities. And now we have been kind of developing the tools and the processes further on. In 2007, Senat Properties, which is the GSA of Finland, started to require BIM in their projects, and that kind of made the breakthrough in our industry, so that now I would say that all the projects are more or less BIM projects that are made, especially in the public sector. And by now we have experience from more than 1,000 projects using the integrated BIM. So I think that we are one of the most experienced building industry companies in that area. And we have now just recently got also awarded by GSA to have we are one of the BIM service partners for GSA. We haven't started any project on that field yet, but we expect that we will have some projects starting this autumn also in United States. So about BIM, and what I would like to emphasize here is really the integrated BIM. Because building information modeling can be used also internally. So if an architect office starts to use building information models but not sharing them, they can of course claim that they are using BIM. But my definition for the use of BIM is that it should be also shared information. I took the definition of what building information modeling means from the National BIM Standard website from United States. There are of course several different definitions what we mean by BIM. But the main thing there is that BIM is really enabling collaboration between different stakeholders so that we can share the information in a digital format that can be directly utilized for different activities during the life cycle of the building. So it's starting from the client requirements collection, then through design, construction phases, and continues through the facility management until the demolition of the building. So the information should have the same life cycle as the product, or actually a little bit longer because it starts before we have the buildings that we are where we are using the building information modeling. The important part of this sharing is, of course, having a kind of the same language among the different participants. And in the building industry, that shared language between the different software products is called IFC, Industry Foundation Classes, which is now supported by all the major software which is used in our industries. And if I think about the situation that what is specific to the architectural engineering, construction, owning and operating, so that the real estate and construction cluster, as we call it in Finland, is that our industry is very much based on projects, and that's one of our strengths. We are very efficient in starting new projects, and in general we know quite well what is expected from us when we join a project, what we should do, when we should do that, what are our responsibilities. But and also that we have traditionally have very good formal language for communication between experts, so that we have classification systems and very formalized drawings. But of course, these also include some negative effects. That this specialized representation is very difficult for the non-professionals to understand. So our clients, customers don't really understand well what we are presenting them in our drawings and specifications. And then also the drawing or document-based system is bad in that sense that we have to replicate the same objects in the different documents. We have them in the plan drawings, sections, elevations, specifications. So it's very difficult to manage the information in a consistent way because we have so many kind of instances of the same thing in the different documents. Also typical for our industry is sub-optimization. So typically the players in any project are selected based on the low bid, which means that we have to minimize the costs and really optimize our own work inside the companies. And this is really not a very efficient way to make the products, to optimize the products. So we end up actually to more expensive products that we could have if we could optimize the whole process. Also, the fragmented nature of our industries is affecting so that we have a large number of shareholders which are selected just for that one project, and they can have also very conflicting interest in the projects. And as the last point here, I have that also our industry is not very eager to change compared to, for example, the information technology industry, where the change is really inbuilt in the business model. In construction industry, the attitude is more that we should do the things the same way as we have been doing them for a long time. How we see what's happening now in the BIM market is that there is a huge transition ongoing now. We have passed the chasm, so we have really started to implement these practices into the business. And how we see the situation now, we are in the bowling alley phase where we are kind of distributing the market in a new way. So new players can find position in the market and really can be part of this tornado kind of an expanding market in the next few years. We expect that BIM will be kind of the mainstream working method within the 5 or 10 years throughout the whole industry. At the moment, it's still that most companies are using it in some level, but not throughout the whole thing. As Nicola mentioned, Finland is one of the globally leading countries, and there is a quite good reason for that. We have been investing quite a lot in the development of these methods already in the late 80s, but especially since 1997 when we started these big programs in Finland. I was leading the VERA program, which really was a huge effort and kind of brought the building information modeling into the industry use. And many people think that investing $140 million in 10 years into the development of BIM seems to be a lot of money. But if you compare that to the value of the construction industry, for example, in Finland, the annual construction was in 2006, which was kind of normal year, about $30 billion US, and the value of the buildings is $450 billion. Compared to that, $14 million per year into the development is not that huge anymore. But anyway, it has affected really the industry quite a lot. So we have changed the way that we are working. The traditional driver has been the really the kind of to avoid the information losses that we have in the traditional methods to work, which is causing significant amount of waste or non-value-added work and errors. And also it's not supporting the decision-making process of our clients very well. But currently there is also a new driver that there is very strong demand to be more aware of the environmental impacts and also to compare the different alternative solutions to be more green in our buildings. And this is an area where the integrated BIM is very strong. We can really make very efficiently different alternative solutions, compare the energy consumption, their environmental impact, which is otherwise very, very difficult to calculate. But these tools are enabling that, and that is something that we are now doing in our own projects in a very kind of standard manner, that every project is simulated so that we know the energy consumption of the building when it's finalized. As mentioned, Senat Properties, our GSA, the owner of the public buildings, they started to test building information modeling in Helsinki University of Technology in 2001. There is actually an excellent report from that first project. It was made by Martin Fischer and Calvin Kamm from Stanford University, and it's still quite valid even though it's 8 years old report, but it's still telling a lot about both the potential and also about the problems that we have when we implement these things. After that, Senat Properties has been testing a lot of the use of BIM in their processes, and then in 2006 they decided that they will start to use BIM as a standard method in their own investment process. And really the kind of that standard use started from the question that, okay, what information is needed for the decision making? And then which parts of this information that is needed are already possible to process with BIM in a better way than the traditional methods. And then also one important part was the market readiness, that do we have companies who can really provide these services for the owner. And then we started to kind of look at the process. At VTT I was responsible of the BIM guidelines for Senat Properties, and we tried to kind of find the balance between what we want to do and what was possible to do with the technologies in 2007. And then in October 2007, Senat Properties took these BIM processes into practical use. First, the mandatory use of BIM was only in the architectural design, but in April this year they expanded it so that now the use of building information models is mandatory in all projects throughout the whole process and covering all design domains. And then they use also models for the visualizations, cost estimations, checking the scope so that the building is designed according to the program, and also energy simulations and different other type of simulations and calculations are done using the model. So it's now real practice in Finland in all the public projects that Senat Properties is owning. And these, they also decided that we translated these BIM guidelines. There are 9 volumes, general part describing the whole process, and then specifically for different design domains and different tasks there. These are available also in English on the Senat Properties website, because they also decided that it's important to continue the international collaboration. We are currently starting the updating of these guidelines, so that we will have updated these 9 volumes updated next year, and also 2 new volumes. So we will have the requirements for the BIM-based project management and another one for BIM-based facility management later next year. So it's now really starting to cover the whole life cycle. Then if I look at the use of the building information model inside our company, really the model that we get from the architect, or in those projects where we don't get that from the architect, we do the building information model ourselves, because it's a mandatory part of our internal processes. And as you can see, we have a lot of different activities, starting from the requirements management, going through different analyses, calculations, simulations, and of course the traditional design processes. But then we also utilize that information in the facility management and what we call the self-reporting building, which means that we are collecting that information through sensors and networks from the building, comparing the behavior of the building to the simulated behavior, and when necessary then making adjustments in the technical systems, so that we really know that how the building is behaving and how it should behave. Some of these tools are our own development. Some of them are commercial tools. Here you have, you can see the names of the different software, where you have the green G, Granlund logo. That's then our own development, and then a lot of commercial tools as well. And essential part of the development that we have been doing is with the integration platform, that we have tools that can handle that information throughout the life cycle of the building. So we have the databases, we have the interfaces to between the different software products that we can seamlessly transfer that information in the process. And just some kind of, not go into the details, but a little bit about the kind of philosophy that we have, that essential part of the whole process, kind of a central piece is really the requirements management tool, which means that we are collecting the client needs in the beginning of the process, specify them in the technical requirements, bring them into the central database, where we at that point don't have any geometry, but we have the list of the spaces that are needed. Then we get the architectural model, we map these requirements to the spatial program, check that the architectural model has all the information that we need in our processes, make the service zoning here, and then start the actual simulation, and we get the geometry and space data to the simulation software, and then the results back to the central database. Only after that starts the actual design process, where we make the system designs, HVAC, electrical, and so forth. And there we take the simulation results as the basis for the design process, and then the design data goes back to the central database. And when the building is finalized, we get all the maintenance information, basic information for the maintenance of the building into the database, and can then report from the maintenance database to the client. So we are covering the whole life cycle, and we are also kind of following the customer's needs, so that when we start new projects, we have the information about their existing facilities, what kind of things we have to change in the next phases. One of the, I'll take as an example project here, the Helsinki Music Center, which was competition almost 10 years ago, but it was delayed. The start of the project was delayed. And when it started, the Senate Properties decided, even though this was started before the BIM requirements, they decided that they will use the modeling in a very extensive way in this project. As you can see, it's a quite large project, almost 9 million cubic feet is the volume of that, and almost 400,000 square feet is the area of that building. And it's totally modeled, all the design disciplines have been modeled, and we have been using those methods that I shortly described there. So in this case, it really starts with the simulations. We take the requirements for the different spaces, we do the energy heat loss calculations, comfort simulations, also kind of compare those, look at the environmental impacts of the early design that architect has been doing, cost estimations, life cycle costs, and also in the special phases like computational fluid dynamics to be sure that the conditions are as required. So a lot of work which is done before the actual HVAC design starts. So we make sure that everything is possible to do the way that the client wants. Then we go to the actual network modeling, which includes also the product data. So we can make automatically in the systems that we are using the network balancing and also the sound calculations, pressure calculations, and so forth. And then we can also export that information in the IFC format so that we can combine that with the other design models and make the design coordination. And this design coordination, there are a couple of tools that we use there. The Navisworks from Autodesk is one of them. It's a very fast tool for the visual inspections, but then we have also a more, I would say, sophisticated tool, a Solibris model checker that is used for the content checking and validation. So it's a spelling checking for the model content. So in a way, if kind of in one picture that process that I was describing, that first we get the architectural basis design, we do the analysis to make sure that everything is okay. Then we go to the system design of the structural engineer as well, and then we make sure that these models are matching together so that there are no conflicts between the design models. And then when we go to the construction phase, the contractor gets the model and very detailed information about the products, and then of course producing the as-built model in the end of that process. And also quite interesting part in the Finnish software development is the MagicCAD, which is the system design tool we use, and Tekla Structures, which is the leading structural design application. They have developed a method that we can handle the voids automatically or semi-automatically between the different design disciplines. So first the mechanical engineer creates the void objects and then sends them to the structural engineer who checks them. They can accept, modify, or reject the proposed voids. And when they are accepted, they are creating automatically the voids in the actual structural objects, which is solving one of the big problems that we have in the complicated buildings. Because this process is in the drafting way, it's quite complicated to make sure that everything fits together. So just an example of what we can do now. So when I describe this process this way, it's of course easy to kind of make the question that, is there a problem? You can do all this already, so what is there to develop and what should we do? And as we see the situation now here in Finland is really that we have started from the technology and kind of course the technology was mandatory. Without the software that is enabling the use of the building information models, you couldn't do the things that I described. But now we have been starting to kind of realizing that actually there are other obstacles that we have still. We have the old working processes and also the old business models. And to be honest, also lack of competent people. Not everybody has been really developing their skills in the modeling. So what we have to now change is the way that we do business and the way that we design buildings, so that we really meet the kind of the requirements that the models are setting, and on the other hand, really get the benefits that the models can provide to the whole process. So we really have to take a very deep look at the way that our industry is working together. So some of the obstacles that we have seen here is that first of all is that the required investments and then the achieved benefits, they don't necessarily happen in the same company. So for example, the architects who are doing the first modeling are not benefiting the same way from the models as the downstream applications and the players who are there receiving more information. And then this is really bringing the question that who wins or who loses in this game, or is it possible that we rethink about the way that we reward the participants in the projects. And then also, because we are working in so fragmented industry, it's difficult to implement this kind of changes which are affecting the way that all the companies are working. This is really affecting all the subcontractors, all the designers, and also the material industries, component industries. And easily we end up in the situation that people are really they don't want to change anything because they don't really know what's going to happen. So the attitude is rather the devil we know. We struggle with the problems that are familiar to us rather than take something which is maybe bringing some unknown problems. Also, the legal responsibilities are quite big question at the moment, because we are using new methods which is then increasing uncertainty, and then of course it's bringing the danger of litigation if something goes wrong. In Finland this is not as big problem as, for example, in the United States, because we are working in a very small country, and people are more used to kind of agreeing the things somehow because they know that they have to work with the same people again. But still, also here it's something that we have to solve, what are the legal responsibilities when we are delivering the models to the other participants. And then also really the clients, the owners of the buildings and the users of the buildings, they don't know what to demand. They don't know what to ask when they start new projects, and then how to control that process. It's totally something new for them. And this is also very difficult to show the actual benefits, because we don't have very clear baselines in the building industry. Every project is different, and it's very difficult to tell what is the reason for the success or what is the reason for the failure. You can't easily find an individual thing which has been real reason for the changes that we have. And also globally especially, but also in Finland, we do have this kind of a big circle that many people expect that you have to have clear evidence of the benefits before they want to change. And you don't have the benefits unless you have experience from the use of that. And you can't use it unless you have the tools. And for a long time it was so that the software companies were not very eager to implement the integration platform in the BIM, because their clients didn't ask that. So we end up in the situation that you can't really prove that you can find benefits because there are no tools, and even if there are some tools, nobody is using them, or you can't measure the benefits. So it's difficult to prove something totally new that it's beneficial in the future. And this has been, I think that we have now overcome this problem in Finland, but in many countries this is still the question that kind of show me the money before people really accept the change. One project that we did about 2 years ago we analyzed one of the Senate properties, university buildings in eastern Finland, in very careful way. We went through the whole process which was based on the integrated BIM, so that we had all the participants afterwards in several workshops and sessions where we collected the information, discussions about the problems and the benefits and what was the reason of something, and then kind of started to build the process map based on these findings. And typically, one big problem is that a lot of information is produced later than it's actually needed in the process. So we are doing things with incomplete information in very many phases of the project. And this is something where we have to really kind of start remodeling the working processes, when who is delivering what in the different phases of the project. And this is a big issue in the future. So far I have been only speaking about Finland, but of course this is not the only country where these things are happening. And here is a slide from California, DPR Construction, who was involved in the Camino Medical Office building, which was made with Southern Health in California. And this was, I think, a groundbreaking project in the United States, because it was first so-called integrated project delivery project where the whole team was collected from the beginning of the project, and also the rewarding system for the different participants was totally different. And this was a real success story, because compared to the estimations when they started the project, it ended about 6 months earlier than expected, and also $9 million below the expected price. And of course, these are so huge benefits that Southern Health is now doing all their project doing this model, using this model, and also the integrated project delivery model has been spreading around in the United States quite fast in the last few years. And I think that this is a very good example that there are real business benefits when we are using the new technology in a new way. So really implementing something also where we have the new business model, not just the new tools. And this is actually a project which we are trying to kind of follow also here in Finland. I don't think that we have been as successful in changing the business models and the work processes as DPR and Southern Health have been in California. And in general, how we see the situation is that when we have some new technology, whatever information communication technologies those are, usually we are progressing stepwise. First, we go to the automational change, which means that we just make the old process faster with the new tools. The traditional CAD in the late 80s, early 90s is an example of that. It was just automating the drafting process, but it didn't really change the way that we work. Then at the moment, most of the use of the building information models is on the informational level, where we use some of the capabilities of the tools that were not available in the old way, but we are not really having that inside our business processes. And then the last step is this transformational change, where we have really changed the working processes, business processes accordingly, so that we really get the full benefits of the new tools. And this is something which is not so easy to do, and that's why so few companies so far have been successfully implementing the BIM in their processes. And this is the step which is providing the competitive advantage to the company for a long time. All the other steps are something which is actually quite easy to copy, and you can be a little bit ahead of your competition, but you can't really get long-lasting benefits by staying on those levels in the implementation of the technologies. So then, what next? What is happening now here in Finland is that we have a totally new way to structure our research and development. We have been establishing new centers for science, technology and innovation. One of them is for the built environment. These are actually companies, so we have this BIM Ltd. Now here, it's established here in Finland. 52 shareholders, meaning leading companies, universities, research institutes are part of the shareholders in the company. And we have now over $3 million equity capital in that company. So it was the starting capital for the company. But we have also promised, got the agreement with the public funding organizations that they will be funding the work here. So we are aiming that we would have something between 60 to 75 million annual turnover in the next few years in this company. And this is the model that we have is providing a new way to coordinate the research in Finland so that it's really meeting the targets which are important for our economy in the future. And it means that the shareholders will define the agenda. They make the decisions about what will be developed together. And we are now preparing the first program for this company. And this is providing, I think, a really excellent way to solve this kind of complex shared problems, as for example the change of the business models and also the working processes and contractual issues. So we expect that we can take some kind of a leap in that area in the next few years. And this first project program that we are now preparing here is called, the working title for that is BIM-based business. I'm leading the preparation group there, and we have from BTT, which was my former employer, we have a couple of people in the core group. So we three will be responsible of writing that program proposal. And then, of course, we will have a lot of companies participate. We will have also a steering group where we have CEOs of the leading companies from Finland so that they can tell really about the needs, and also one of the research directors of VTT is involved in there. So we are trying to build something new at the moment. So the main idea there is to build a new business ecosystem for our industry. So moving from the production-oriented processes into the processes driven by the client needs, so really client-oriented approach to things. These, as mentioned several times, business models, working processes, and also that the compensation models for the participants should be based on kind of an open book type of things. And of course, we are continuing the use of BIM based on the open standards, meaning practically IFCs. And we expect that this will have then an effect into the efficiency and productivity in our industry, and we can meet the client needs. We had a first workshop recently where we had 4 teams that we tried to identify different projects inside those. So work processes, logistics, supply chain management is one of those, requirement management and user-oriented production, and processes for the use and maintenance of the buildings or built environment. Also the infrastructures are included here. And then the procurement and contractual models, so how to buy these new services. And we see that really what we try to build here is that this business ecosystem is the platform where we have the common interface for the companies, so everybody has the kind of, again, the same way as with the drawings, we have a standard interface between the companies, but then the competitiveness comes from the internal processes, so how you can utilize that information that you get from the shared platform inside your own processes. That is then, that's the part that we are not sharing with our competitors, but we share this process and kind of an information platform for the systems that we are using internally. So this is the approach that we have at the moment. So a couple of slides about conclusion. So in my opinion, the situation is so that the integrated BIM has created the technical foundation for the new business models and work processes. And I see that we are now in a similar situation that when we were in the late 80s, early 90s, where mobile phone market, where the new technologies and standards created totally new opportunities for the companies, and basically they changed the way that people communicate. Of course, Nokia's success story has been encouraging us here in Finland that it's possible really have the global impact in the technology field, even though we are in a very small country. In our industries, we see two main obstacles in the changes. One is this old work processes, which are based still on the documents. We really haven't been thinking about the information flows between the project participants, and that's something that we have to do. And then also we have to change the low-bid business model so that we will get the rewards based on the added value and enabling the optimization of the whole project instead of optimizing the results inside one company, which is then hurting the whole project. And because there is very strong connection between the internal processes and with the legal and technical interfaces between the companies, we really have to look at also the legal issues here. And also this is requiring a collaboration. It's something that none of the shareholders, none of the companies working in this industry can do alone. But of course there are different models to drive the change. One change driver can be, as has been already, GSA in the United States or Senaproperties here in Finland, so the big public clients can start demanding something which is changing the industry on their sector, but not affecting all players. Then we can have this kind of success stories of voluntary consortiums like this integrated project delivery project, which other health and DPR construction has been very successful in the United States in changing the way people work. Or we see that the third option is this kind of an industry-wide proactive R&D collaboration, which we have been doing already before inside these technology programs, but now we have a new platform where we try to do it in a more industry-driven way. So that's concluding my presentation, just kind of as a little joke that this is actually the building services model of that new Helsinki music center, and it's really like some kind of a Star Trek spaceship, where the background actually is a little bit kind of an indication to that. Sometimes when you look at these models, you start to think about that where do the people really kind of fit into this building. But I can assure you that there are big concert halls and other things behind these technical systems. So thank you for your interest. I have included here some links to the material, which includes more information about the building information models, and also my email address is there. So any questions at the moment?
Yes, thank you, Arto. In fact, I want to reiterate that we are recording this webinar and will post the slides and audio on the fiatech.org website in the media library later this week. I've been getting a lot of emails of people who have been trying to keep up in taking notes, Arto, and you've had too much information. So just want to make sure everyone knows that they can get copies. I do have some questions for you. Is there a central tool assuring data configuration management from all the tools involved? A, and B, intra-application company workflows? I guess that's like a...
Yeah, well, at the moment, I don't think that we have that. Of course, there are some applications or some software vendors who are covering quite a big part of the project. So inside one product family, there are some tools for that kind of things, but not for the project where you have tools from different vendors. And typically in our industry, we have projects where people have different tools. And also, even if they use the tools from the same vendor, it's often not so that they would work in an environment where they can kind of share them using all those. So it's more like kind of publishing one version of the model and then working with that. That's the reason why we have made that tool that I mentioned, Roomex, which is our internal version management tool. We can also manage the different versions of the architectural structural models inside that tool. So that's enabling our internal processes, but I'm not aware that anybody would have that available for the whole team.
Okay.
Hopefully in the future.
Coming soon, right. Another question regarding as-builts from BIM. Who is making the updates to document as-built conditions and to what models?
Well, that's of course depends on what kind of contractual models you apply in the project. Of course, the most natural way would be that it would come from the construction companies. The contractors would provide the as-built information. But in many cases, at least here in Finland, it's so that actually the designers, engineers and architects are updating the model accordingly, so what's happening on the site. In the United States, I think that it's more often so that the construction companies or the subcontractors are providing those models, because the detailed design is done in the United States mainly by the contractors, not by the same designers that made the conceptual design. So there are different models to do that.
Okay. How often do you use the model from the architect versus developing your own model?
It's increasing now rapidly, that the models that we get from the architects. It's still, I would say that if I take all the projects that we have, the majority of the project is still so that we have to do at least some of our modeling. So it's so that in some cases the architects don't do the models, or they are not using kind of the right methods to make the model so that it would be usable for us. Also in some cases there are still technical limitations. If the geometry is very complicated, the current IFC interfaces don't necessarily cover all the details. So in those cases, we have to at least do some part of the model so that it's fulfilling the requirements for the energy analysis. But what would I say? Maybe 25%, 1/3. Between that, I think that it's the amount that we can get from the architects at the moment. It's
okay.
a for this project, it's always, but they are not our only customer.
Well, that's a great segue, because the next question says, Arto, at a conference in Montreal in 2006, you gave a talk about the state of IFC. How have things changed in the past 3 years?
Well, that's actually I can say that it was some people inside the building smart, or at that time IAI, they didn't like very much what I was saying there. I have been in the core of the organization for a long time, but because I was criticizing really the implementation quality and the certification quality of the product at that time. We still have some problems in that area, but at the moment the new certification process is almost finalized. It will be much better. It will really make sure that products that are certified, they really function. So I suppose that we will have the first new certification in early next year. But already now, with the old certification, which is not ensuring that everything works fine, the software companies are doing much better work in the implementation than they did, let's say, 3 years ago, because now there is much more interest and real use of the tools. At that time, I was also, when I was criticizing the quality, I was also saying that one of the reasons is that it's not a business case for the software houses unless somebody is using those tools. So there is a lot that you can develop, and you develop only the features that are important for your customers. And at that time, very few companies really use the IFCs. So I think that it's improving now very fast, and I'm quite confident that after, let's say, 2 years, we will be in the level that we can trust that we can get that information from any major architectural design software.
Okay. We have a lot of questions. A contractor wants to know, if you have a change, say you have a change in an air handling unit for an HVAC system, as design is progressing, does your system reflect that change in other documents being used, such as equipment list, motor list, electric wiring, line lists, etc.?
Actually, we use the integrated model, so those lists are coming from the model. So we are updating that only in the model, and then we are producing the new version of that. Those different lists and specifications, whatever the documents are coming from the model. We are not updating anything in the document. So that's really central part of the thing, that there is. If every piece of information is only stored once in one place and you update it only once, then the documents are just used to that information, and then you have just a new version of that document when you need that.
Great. Question, how do owners get involved in the entire BIM process and gain access to the knowledge and data in the BIM model and play an active role in improving or approving design change orders, for example? So this question is kind of how do we optimally involve the owners in this process?
Well, that's a good question, and if I would know the answer, I think that we would have much more owners actively involved in Finland. But I think that we haven't been very good in kind of addressing the real needs of the owners. We have been talking for a long time that they benefit from these models and they get better buildings and so forth. But I personally, I have started to think that actually when we think about the construction process and the design of the new buildings, it's actually a disturbance in the business process of the owner. For them, the actual business process is renting those buildings and getting the income from the use of the buildings. And we haven't been very well addressing the business processes of the owners. What is the information that they really need in their own business process? So we are tackling now the facility management with a kind of a maintenance of the building, but the actual owning business, it's not very well addressed yet. So that is also one of the areas that we try to study and identify in this program that I mentioned that we are now preparing. But I think that one of the problems has been all the time in the development of BIM that most people who have been involved in this have a designer background, and they don't really have the deep understanding and knowledge about the actual owning processes. So I think that this is really a crucial question, and I hope that I would have an answer, but unfortunately I don't.
Thank you. Someone wants to know what the acronym IFC stands for.
Industry Foundation Classes. And it's a data specification standard for the data exchange between the building information modeling software, and it's also the name of the data format. So you can see also files where you have that .ifc kind of in the end, which is identifying that they are IFC files, but it's also the specification for that. So it's defining the object structures, relationship between the objects and different attributes in the object and so forth. What kind of an information you can store there.
Okay, what is the Finnish equivalent of OmniClass for data development and standardization that is being used in the U.S., if you know?
We have our classification system is actually Talo 2000, and that means it's building 2000. These classification systems are typically very much in country specific. I think that it's almost always country specific, and actually that is something that has been also considered in the development of the IFC. So you can have there the information about what classification system you use, and then you can use those those terms that are in that classification system in the model. So in the model you tell what is the system that you use in this model, and then you have the information accordingly.
Two questions here, somewhat related. How many or how much paper documents are you seeing currently, and do you expect that paper documents will be eliminated entirely in the future? They said 10 years.
Well, if you put the 10 years, then I don't think that it will totally be eliminated. But in the long run, yes, I think that when we will have, for example, that kind of an like a digital paper type of things, like we have now the digital books, when we have the displays that you can use on the site and in those conditions, I think that in the long run they will replace the paper, but it will take quite a long time. What is the amount of paper? That's something that is very difficult to say. I think that it hasn't been decreasing so far very much. At the moment, we have several projects where the site is using a lot of these models, so that they usually have Navisworks, and they use that to kind of go through the model, find the detail that they need, communicate that to the guys who are really doing the work, but still they need also paper documents. More and more it's happening that the site is actually printing the documents themselves, so they take the view what they want to have from the model, then they print the document for that specific purpose at that time. So that's increasing definitely, but still when the guys are really working on the construction site, they still usually carry the paper.
Well, the next question was, on average, how many times is a piece of information entered during the design and construction of a project? Do you have any metrics on that based on size and scope of projects?
You mean the same information is really created? I think that it used to be so that I remember that AEC3 made some studies of that, and traditionally it was something 7 to 10 times that every piece of information was recreated in the process. But that has definitely been decreasing, because now we are more and more adding the information to the existing objects, so we are making the design more accurate rather than recreating that information.
Are you using laser scanning for capturing construction details, and or what other technologies are you keeping in sight for integration with BIM, such as RFID or GIS?
Yeah, we are using laser scanning. Not our company, we don't have any laser scanners, but we are using the models that come from the laser scanning. For example, if we make some like parking caves or something like that, then we will have the exact kind of the shape of the tunnels and caves from the laser scanning directly, so that it's just the triangulation, so that we know exactly where the surfaces are. Then if it's a renovation building, Senat Properties is doing all the renovations also using BIM. In the renovation project, it's usually so that the laser scanning is producing first the clouds, kind of the point clouds, and then either a specialized company or the architect is creating kind of an design model based on that cloud, so that we have what we call the inventory model. So the base, kind of a starting point of the building as a design model. So, but still we have also that cloud behind that, so that we can check the details if we want. But it's much more usable for the design purposes that we have this kind of an building information model for the starting point, because it's much smaller amount of information than those huge clouds that you have from big complicated buildings.
And we are, thank you. We are running out of time. I don't know, I still have a few questions. Arto, do you have a few more minutes, or alternatively I could have these folks follow up with you separately?
Yeah, up to you.
Well, if you have maybe 5 more minutes. For those who want to stay on and still have some questions in the queue, I'll finish these 5 questions. For those who have to drop off, we will, like I said, have a copy of the presentation on our feedtech.org website later this week, synced up audio and slides. So question, if documents are printed on site, this implies a level of detail in the model and the updates that are being done. Does this also suggest that the contractor must update the model, or is there an agreement to have the designers update the model on behalf of the contractors?
Yeah, in Finland, the business model is so that the designers actually doing much more detailed models than in the United States, and they are continuing the design work until the end of the construction process. So in here, it is so that the designers are updating the models. And of course, it's not so that all the information is, we still also have 2D drawings in some details. Not so much in our office, but if I look at the architectural design, it's definitely so that some details are much easier to describe using the 2D drafting, and the tools really don't enable that you have that level of detail in the model, that everything would come from the model. But even in those cases, usually the contractors get the electronic drawings from the designers and can print them on site. But more and more is going into the model, and in our case, it's very little information which is not included in the model. They are very, very detailed. We have actually all the product information, so that even the technical properties of the different equipments, they are in the model.
Wow. Fourth question. How have you, I guess, measured the value of BIM to your company in terms of time and cost? And if not, how would a company measure the value of it?
That's again an excellent question. That there has been several projects that trying to identify the value, and for example, Martin Fischer and his group, they have been doing some studies about trying to measure that. It's very difficult to quantify that kind of by dollars, saying that this is actual value. But definitely, if you look at the kind of how much it's improving the quality, in the sense that reducing the amount of requests for information and things like that, or the errors on site that you have to be rebuilt or corrected. Otherwise, that's definitely something which is happening. And but for example, in our company, we haven't even tried to measure it in that way. It has been just that kind of the tools have been developing further and further during the time, and we have seen that they have been improving our business, but we haven't been trying to quantify that.
Okay, that was actually question 3 and 4. So these are the final 2 questions. Do you have any experience with integration processes between BIM and ERP systems?
No, I don't really know that any. At least I don't know any projects where that. I suppose that somebody has been doing something, but unfortunately I don't know any.
I will say that within Fiatech, we obviously work a lot with the power process industry and capital projects, and we do have some interoperability compatible programs like with the ISO 15926 standards. So that individual asking that question, if you want to follow up with me afterward, I can tell you a bit about what we're doing. Okay. And final question, how are you interfacing, or are you interfacing with code officials? Is there a role for them in this?
So it was that interfacing with what?
Like building code officials, building code?
Okay. No, not at the moment. That's something that we have started now the discussions. We have the first kind of ideas about that. That has been something that in Finland, really the building code and also the kind of permitting process, people haven't been very much interested in this. So this is something which is much further ahead in, for example, in Singapore and in Norway. They have been doing a lot of work in that area, and I think that they are much ahead of us. That's one area where we are now trying to tackle that problem as well.
Well, Arto, thank you for staying with us a few minutes longer, and it was a very valuable and content-rich presentation. Like I said, there's been a lot of requests to get this copy of the presentation, and I just want to thank you again for joining us and staying up late to join us. And for those that are still on the call, we do this every Tuesday. We will not be having one next Tuesday, however. And that was just due to a scheduling conflict that someone had to cancel. But join us back October 27th for Paul Doherty, who will be talking about digital assets. And the rest of the schedule is also available on the FIATech website. And finally, I just want to plug and let people know that we did release our call for presentations for the FIATech annual technology conference. And that information's on our homepage, and that information went out yesterday. So please take a look at that and consider joining us in March 29th to the 31st. With that, I hope everyone has a great week, and thanks again for joining us.